Okay, we're live. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Polkadot broadcast, and Kristen here. Today, join with me is Alberto, the CEO and co-founder of Papermoon. Hi,
Yeah.
welcome.
Thank you, Kristen. Thanks for having me here.
Mm. The biggest deal in Polkadot ecosystem is that the Polkadot Hub is going to the smart contract is going to be live on Polkadot Hub in 27 January, and it's happening in a week. And but there's some argument that smart contract is the baseline for every L1s. But for Polkadot, it might change a lot. So uh, I'm very happy that we can have Albert to explore that what the smart contract can bring the change to the Polkadot ecosystem. And to kick it off, let's dive into the smart contract directly. Uh, Over the past few years, when we talk about smart contract platforms, we also come down to metrics like TPS, gas fee, and block times. And now that now it's 26, and so I want to hear your uh, perspective on how has the core competitive landscape for smart contract has changed, and what matters today compared to the past.
Yeah, that's a great question, Kristen. So yeah, I think generally speaking, there has been consolidation on general purpose smart contract platforms, right? I
Mhm.
think there was a time in the past in which you just like said, "Hey, I'm an EVM smart contract platform," and that was your
Mhm.
project, right? And without having sort of like a specific unique value proposition.
Mhm.
And now there has been a little bit of consolidation in general purpose platforms.
Mhm.
I think one of the benefits is that smart contracts on Polkadot Hub. Let's first recap, right? I mean, this is the first time that Polkadot will have a native smart contract platform, right? That is basically governed by the Polkadot ecosystem and Polkadot users instead of being kind of like what it was before, in which you had general purpose smart contract platforms, but each was their own project, right, and governed by their own sovereign, let's say, ecosystem. Now, this is truly the first time that Polkadot will have a native smart contract platform, which is definitely exciting. And I think smart contracts on Hub will allow high iterations when building products, right? I think it's a lot easier to build a product on a smart contract platform than to build a blockchain and then build a product on top of it, right? And so it will allow, at least in my opinion, for a very high iteration cycle on building products, right? You're going to be able to build a lot of products and see what actually sticks.
Mhm.
And this is one of the goals that Web3 Foundation and Parity have set for 2026 and on, right? Like the idea of building products for people.
Mhm.
And I do believe that one of the main differences that of having smart contracts on Polkadot is that we've yet in the entire blockchain ecosystem, we've yet not onboarded enough users to
Mhm.
know which systems are truly resilient and decentralized, right? And we know
Mhm.
that Polkadot has been very resilient and very robust in terms of infrastructure. And so now the idea of having a smart contract platform on top of such a so robust infrastructure is definitely like a game changer.
Mhm. Yeah. uh, Finally Polkadot have a native smart contract that will uh, uh, the individual developers can join the Polkadot ecosystem with very low threshold. So yeah, they're
Yeah,
gonna
that's
be.
true. I mean, that's something that I didn't mention, but it's true, right? So the friction or barriers to entering
Mhm.
the Polkadot ecosystem,
Mhm.
let's say from a native perspective, have now been lowered because anyone can go get dots and then launch your smart contract on Polkadot in a matter of hours, right? Before, if you wanted to build on top of Polkadot, it was a bit more complex because you needed, what was called before a parachain slot. Now it's
Mhm.
called a core. you need to build your own project, build your own palettes, right? And that required a lot of engineering overhead just to get started. Right now, it is just very, very simple, and that's why I mean now it will create a new cycle of like very high iterations of products because people can get started a lot easier.
Yeah, before entering into the Polkadot Hub era, and the Polkadot ecosystem have laid some fundamental, some solid fundamentals for technical stuff. For example, the XCM, the Polkadot 2.0, and XCM is one of the core selling point for Polkadot ecosystem before, and now it's behind the scene. It's still working, but we don't talk it a lot anymore. But can you elaborate to our audience that what new potential and use cases can XCM unlock specifically for Polkadot Hub?
Yeah, and I think that's I don't know if it's a misconception, but it's a lot of things like a lot of one of the things a lot of people don't realize, right? That the introduction of smart contracts and hub doesn't really change anything in terms of the existing XCM flows, right? I mean, it's just basically at least it's not negatively impacts the XCM flows, meaning that teams within the Polkadot ecosystem that have their own blockchains can still have the same old XCM flows that they're already executing. But it actually introduces a new possibility of paths and applications to be built on top of, right? Using kind of Hub as a service distributor for the ecosystem, right? I mean, I think there's a really good talk from Sub-Zero by Cisco, which is one of the parity engineers that actually he has focused a lot on XCM. And I definitely recommend go and watch that because he painted very clearly, right? Like the role of Hub now in the XCM realm, let's say, of Polkadot. One example that it's kind of an example that I'm familiar with is I don't know if you know CCTP, which is basically Circle's kind of like cross-chain protocol. And one of the things that they require for CCTP, it's native USDC issuance, right? And native USDC issuance happens on Hub. And so now there could be a path for having any project within the Polkadot ecosystem to get CCTP support, right? Because now you have and CCTP requires smart contracts. That's why the introduction of smart contracts is so important. And this is theoretical, right? I'm not saying this is happening, but now CCTP could be deployed, let's say, to Hub, and then now use XCM so that projects within the Polkadot ecosystem can get native access to CCTP. If I think about that, I think it's super exciting, and that's actually something that it's unlocked by the possibility of both smart contracts and Hub and XCM. So I don't know if it's going to happen, but I just think it's exciting.
Yeah, it's very exciting. For the the previous project that already existing in the Polkadot ecosystem, and actually they are kind of coexisting with the Polkadot Hub, so they can also leverage the everything on the Polkadot Hub, like the yeah.
Exactly. And the way they would do that is via XCM, right?
Yeah.
XCM v5 introduces a bunch of really cool changes in terms of like how you can, what is called transacting, how from, let's say a parachain, you can actually transact or execute code on Hub. And the idea being now is that people can build products that are much cleaner for the user and less, let's say, technically challenging, right, for the users.
Yeah, and from the first version of Polkadot white paper and till now, it's been it's been years, and the taste for users have changed. The users nowadays are very picky. They don't want to dive into the technical details anymore, and now they want straightforward products that is the product usable and is it user friendly. So for the Polkadot Hub, and now we are entering into the second age. So uh, uh, I want to hear your opinions on what do you think the technology already built within the Polkadot can finally translate into products that are meaningfully better, either compared to other Air Ones or compared to Polkadot's own past experiences.
Yeah, I agree. So yeah, the Polkadot suffered heavily from this back in 2023 and 2024, right? Like this
Yeah.
is just an example. Like when I was in 2023 and 2024 in conferences, right? And people would ask me, hey, in what ecosystem are you working? I would say Polkadot. They will all say, oh man, the technology is so good, but it's really complex. It's really complex, right? That was like an ongoing joke that I heard from people all the time, right?
Mhm.
In which like everyone agrees that Polkadot technology is extreme, insanely good, but it was kind of seen as a very complex ecosystem to build on top of, right? And so, um, I think that translated into not having products that tackle real human problems, right?
Mhm.
And I think the introduction of smart contracts really helps because, as we mentioned before, smart contracts allow for a very low, barrier of entry to be able to start building applications and products. And so I think it's just it's just now, and also that with the vision of Parity and Web3 Foundation and the new product oriented vision that it's laser focused on tackling this, right? And basically solving real world real humans problems. And then also leveraging the infrastructure that Polkadot has built, or Polkadot offers to create such products, right? This means that products will be human oriented, but also truly scalable, right? And that's something that I mentioned before, in which there's not been a smart contract platform or a blockchain that has been able to, let's say, bring a real amount of users. We're talking about millions of users, right? And still be decentralized and scalable and so on. And so I think time will tell, but I think the introduction of smart contracts are super important because it lowers the barrier of entry. It also helps for like a high iterative cycle of products, but also this also coincides with the new vision of product oriented, uh, solving human problems, and then benefiting from Polkadot proven infrastructure.
Yeah.
And I agree.
Uh,
I think the idea would be to completely abstract all the technicalities from the user experience, right? So that users really are using the products and not basically dealing with using a product.
mm. Smart contract is not a never happened before innovation. It's kind of a baseline for L1s. So we can see from other L1s, they come across many user very they come across a lot of frictions when using an application. For example, it's very hard to get recovered from the issues, and always stuck by the gas fees you have to prepare from ahead, and also you have to switch between the lines. All of this can create a lot of frictions for the users, and it also happens in Polkadot ecosystem. So do you think that the launch of Polkadot hub uh, the launch of a smart contract on Polkadot Hub can make the user's life easier in at such point?
Yeah, and I think it's important to kind of like think about it from a timeline perspective, right? Like
Mhm.
we've mentioned this before, like smart contracts mainly tackle the how easy it is to build a product, um because low barrier of entry, and so on. But you also have to consider that the user experience, we have to be honest about this, like the user experience has gotten way better over the past years, right? If you go back to, for example, 2018, 2019, 2020, sending a cross-chain message or a cross-chain transfer was super hard. Like the barriers of entry were insanely high, right? And so and nowadays you have applications that makes this a breeze, right? also onboarding and offboarding providers have easily kind of like helped lower the barrier of entry for end users, right? Nowadays, like anyone with a credit card can buy a lot of different cryptocurrencies, right? And so the user experience has gotten better. In my opinion, is it where we wanted it to be? No, because we want Web3 to be a as good as Web2 in terms of user experience without the drawbacks of Web2, but it
Mm,
has gotten better, right?
mhm,
And so I think the combination of smart contracts accessibility and extensibility plus Polkadot infrastructure plus the better products, right? That this new vision can result in these kind of like better paths or better user experience for users. Um, one of the what you mentioned this before, right? I mean, people in blockchains have dealt with like loss of funds and things like that. And one of the things that Polkadot offers natively is a possibility of a governance, a truly decentralized governance systems that can help in these situations, right? And I think that's also part of the Polkadot infrastructure, right? This baseline of a DAO that governs the infrastructure that makes it truly resilient to a lot of things. And so I still believe there are challenges ahead because nothing gets built
mhm,
overnight. But the idea is identifying where the hurdles are and then just basically building better products. But like I said, I think it's important to also acknowledge that products in Web3 are way better nowadays than they were 3 or 4 years ago. And I think one of the reasons being is that 3 or 4 years ago, the main narrative was, hey, have an EVM chain, and that's it. And nowadays, the narrative has changed into now creating your own L1 is not the narrative. Now creating a product that solves a
mhm.
problem, it's basically the new narrative. So yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
so, yeah. So what is the hurdles nowadays for building a user-friendly blockchain? The dApps.
Yeah, it's a tough question, right? But I still believe that being able to provide a Web3 experience with the
Mhm,
Web3 drawbacks, right? At the end of the day, one of the main kind of friction points for Web3 applications is, for example, like the path that a user has to take to interact with that application, right? They have to have a wallet. They have to understand what a wallet is. They need to understand the risk of owning a wallet, right? Because nowadays, if I have a debit card and I use it to pay for groceries, but it gets duplicated, the
mhm,
bank has insurance for me and covers, you know what I mean, these kind of things. In Web3, um, the main idea is one of the main ideas, at least in my perspective, is that you're responsible for your own actions because you own your own actions, right? And so I think, and this is a problem in my opinion about Web3 in general. This is not Polkadot specific, right? And I think how Polkadot can solve that problem, it's really interesting. We'll see, right? I mean, there's been a lot of discussions about proof of personhood and how that can be implemented into the products, right? And so it would be really interesting to see sort of like how that major friction point gets solved, basically. But yeah, Polkadot has a lot of extensibility by itself because you have it's a really modular platform in which you can actually build modules on top of smart contracts to truly lower the barriers of entry for users, basically, to use the products.
mm. I know it's not a easy question because it's the problem that garner. It's a problem that not only Polkadot ecosystem have to solve. It's the problem that all the Web3 ecosystem have. And for the Polkadot ecosystem, for Polkadot, it's just a platform. It offers uh, technical for developers to have ideas on what kind of applications to deploy, and so mm, because we just attended the hackathons in China, in Shenzhen, China, and the most questions raised by the developers are, what kind of product are best to be built on Polkadot so that they can leverage Polkadot's technical strengths do you have some advisors to them?
Yeah, I wish I knew the answers to all the questions, because at the end of the day, if I knew the answers to all the questions, we wouldn't have problems, right? But yeah, no,
Mhm.
I advise definitely, right? So, I, I think for a long time the Web3 ecosystem has been of high iteration cycles, right? What this means is that there's been products that been the mainstream products, or the narratives, right, for some very short amount of time, right now, for example, I believe it's everything around prediction markets is what's like the new buzzword and the new thing,
Mhm.
right? And so I think definitely kind of like it's really hard to give an advice, because an advice could be something that is very short lived, in the sense, you never know what's going to be the next cycle about. And
Mhm.
so I think my general advice, and also DeFi has been a solid backbone, has a solid backbone. And so the question is, what would be the next thing that would bring major adoption to Web3, right? For some time, people thought there were games, right? For some time, people thought, there were prediction markets. Prediction markets have existed for a very long time, but now, because I believe, because of regulatory, changes in the regulatory ecosystem around blockchain, they become kind of mainstream. So I think more than giving a specific advice on what to build is think about two things, right? First, what could be the next thing that could bring major adoption in blockchains, instead of just saying, I'm going to build something on top of DeFi, I'm going to build something on top of, like, think about something that solves a real problem that people have, and blockchain actually is solving that problem. You're not creating a problem then to solve it yourself. um and the second thing is that, we talked about this, like user experience. And so, Hub with smart contracts has a lot of the built-in blocks now for people to create products, but there will still be need for infrastructure, right, to onboard the next million users. And so, what is that infrastructure like? What does it look like? um a lot of the ideas around Web3 and user experience were around account abstraction, and there was a buzz in account abstraction solutions and technologies. I think it was like over a year ago. And so, how would that look like in the Polkadot ecosystem, right? How can you lower the barriers of entry for users to use Hub and use the products on top of Hub? I think those are two advices I would give.
A killer application is all everyone's wanted, but all we have to do is just to get the tech ready and to see what's going to happen, and just hope that more developers can join and try, try
Yeah, yeah,
anything they can.
yeah. And also truly kind of like built on top of what makes Polkadot unique, right? Like resilient infrastructure that is really centralized and scalable, and then
Mhm,
yeah, try to push it to the limit, right?
mhm,
um but yeah, it's not an easy question, because at the end of the day, and also one of the really good things that Polkadot offers is a possibility of, you starting your own project on Hub, but then, if you start reaching the limits of what, Hub can offer, you can always kind of, go back and create your own parachain, and also
mhm.
have that direct connection to Hub in terms of XCM, right? You would have to understand kind of the complexities around that, but that also, it's a path that Polkadot has offered. So yeah.
Yeah, I think action always speak louder than words. Copy is sometimes is also a very good idea. For example, you cannot be the first DeFi, but you can be the second one. You know, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think just firstly, a simple, just learn from other dApps and try on Polkadot first is also a very good idea. That's yeah, that's just
And you got to think that the barriers of entries, as we've mentioned before, are much lower now, right? Like, so
mhm,
before in a hackathon, to build something meaningful that was solving a problem, you basically needed to do it on top of a parachain, or on top of
mhm,
an existing general smart contract platform that has its limitations, right? Now you
yeah,
have a much, let's say, wider path, because now you can build smart contract based products, which are, a lot easier to get into. But definitely think about something that kind of like will truly be a problem solving application, right? Because
Mhm.
a lot of times, in hackathons, a lot of people just grab whatever project on Ethereum and redeploy it to Polkadot and say, hey, this is really cool because now this is on Polkadot. And that, okay, yes, it's pretty cool, but it's not really solving a problem, right? And it's not
Mhm.
really a product that like it's original and solve this specific problem, because that problem was already solved by this other project
Mhm.
in another blockchain, right? So
Yeah, they have to think about what problems that Polkadot can solve.
and
Uh,
also, for example, with the introduction of things like proof of personhood, you're going to be able to build new things, right? Like that it's utilizing proof of personhood
mm,
as a new kind of gateway for users. And so, like I said, I try to think about something specific to the Polkadot infrastructure
mhm.
for the next million users. Yeah.
Yeah. As you mentioned, for applications and for user experience, it's much more better than compared to 2 or 3 years ago. But the security is still a very major concern. So for the smart contract, how do you view the security of smart contract on Polkadot Hub, and what gives you confidence in its design?
Yeah. So I think overall, like the smart contract ecosystem has matured a lot, right? If you
Mhm.
see the attacks that were done in 2017, 2018, you know, it was basically, I would say a lot of it was lack of maturity, right? Like lack of understanding of how these applications worked and so on.
Mhm.
Nowadays, generally speaking, right, the attacks are a lot more sophisticated, right? They
Mhm.
either go through social engineering to really kind of like very, very, very advanced attacks on the flows and so on. And so I think that's a benefit of having EVM smart contracts, right? But that's actually a result, like a product of just maturity overall, right? Like smart contracts have been around for around 15 years, 14 years, and the entire smart contract ecosystem has matured a lot. And
Mm.
so um, Polkadot now offers a smart contract platform that inherently benefits from all that maturity, right? And then for Polka VM smart contracts, right? I think you overall have to understand the risks in a smart contract, right? A lot of the attack vectors don't really depend on the language; they just depend on the kind of the way that the attack is executed. And so, yeah, I think overall, it's just about understanding the risks, assessing the risks, doing audits, like kind of the typical flows. But I necessarily don't agree that the exploits right now are worse than before. They're just more complex, but also the ecosystem has a lot more value, right? And so back in the day, in terms of percentage, I don't really know like how big were the exploits or attacks compared to the kind of total value of the network. I think right now, because blockchain has had a lot of more adoption, right, and now has a lot more value. There's also more high profile exploits, as you mentioned. So yeah, no, that's definitely important. And I think one of the unique things that Polkadot offers right now is the Polkadot Assurance Legion. So this is a bounty that supports people building on top of Polkadot with security audits, with security tooling, right? And it's treasury backed bounty that the whole purpose of it's improve the security in the Polkadot ecosystem, right? And to my knowledge, it's the only ecosystem that offers such kind of initiative, which is pretty cool, right? Because it means that the Polkadot treasury and community values security within the ecosystem because they understand that it's important for the health of the ecosystem, right?
Yeah. This for the security aspect is involving as well, and uh, I think that for some security protocols, they have to be embedded into the protocol automatically. You know, uh, users don't have to worry about the securities. But now it's not. We are not still reaching to that stage. So for users, you have to be, very careful about your wallet, and don't put, all of your money in on chain, and to have some concerns on the security issues. And back to the EVM. And so far, we've been talking mainly about EVM smart contract, which feel like an entry point rather than the end goal, because we still have a Polka VM, which promises much stronger performance. So could you share with us, what makes PVM special and what kind of potential it could unlock?
Yeah, it's a good question, right? And I don't potentially see PVM being better than EVM and so on. I mean, for sure, it brings a tons of optimizations and improvements. But there are also benefits to the EVM, right? And so I think that's one of the reasons why, Polkadot Hub offers both paths, right? And what's really interesting is that it also offers the possibility of cross VM calls, meaning that you can have logic on an EVM that calls a logic on the PVM, right? So that you get kind of the best of both worlds. So let's take a step back, right? So the EVM brings composability with a huge set of tools, right? So when you're building on top of an Ethereum compatible platform, you're immediately welcome with a huge amount of tools and general tools, right? Like Hard Hat Foundry, Block Explorers, and so on. And so it's a very mature development ecosystem. You also have a set of contracts that are kind of like standardized and they're like inherently secure, right? Like, for example, there has been no major hacks or no hacks in a baseline ERC20 token, right? Contract. If you follow a standard, right? If you, for example, grab the Open Zeppelin ERC20 token standards and you use it, you're guaranteed, not 100% because it's never 100%, that you will not suffer from an exploit. And so you actually inherit all that if by building on top of the EVM, which is super cool. But the EVM has constraints, right? It's a sandbox environment. You can only do what EVM bytecode allows you to do, and that's why we talked before about solutions around the EVM that are super complex because they're limited to what the EVM can execute. And it's also very inefficient for some type of computation, right? And the PVM, it's a lot more like CPU-like execution model. So developers have general developers, I'm talking, have a more clear understanding of what they can build on top of RISC-V VM than in an EVM, right? Because it's the RISC-V execution model is a lot more like a CPU, like a standard CPU execution model. I'm not a truly expert in this topic, but I think that's one of the reasons why there's a big hype when Doom, you could run the Doom game on top of the PVM and so on. But also RISC-V benefit from a well-known language, right? Any language that compiles to RISC-V can be used for smart contracts, right? And one of the clear benefits of this was Parity developed something called Result-C, which was a Solidity compiler that compiled Solidity into RISC-V bytecode or Polka VM, right? And so this meant that you could actually grab a Solidity smart contract, deploy it to and execute it on top of the Polka VM. And so RISC-V code actually has a lot of these kind of inherent benefits. That it's a well-known language, so anything that compiles to RISC-V should be compatible immediately. So yeah, I think it promises a lot of high throughput performance, especially in heavy calculations. And so I think it's truly exciting to see a kind of application or product that actually benefits from both VMs, right? Instead of saying I'm building my entire thing on Polka VM because it's way much performant and so on. That's not always the case. Sometimes you want simplicity right on top of performance if there's not a huge penalty on the simplicity side. And so I'm really excited to see kind of these dual VM applications being built, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah. So can I say that developers, there's no learning curve for developing on Polka VM compared to deploying dApps on EVM?
There's always a learning curve for sure. Like it is not like magic, but especially because if you come from the EVM world, right, building on top of the PVM will have limitations because of your original starting point. If your starting point is the EVM, there are some things that you can do on the EVM that you cannot do on the PVM, right? Right out of the get go. And so yeah, there's always a learning curve. There's always like limitations. There's always, so you need to understand, and I think the Polkadot documentation does a really good job on especially now that we're focusing on the Polka VM side. We'll have all the clear kind of differences and things that developers can expect, right? But I would say that a lot of developers would feel more comfortable with the kind of RISC-V execution because it's more CPU like, right? And so they feel more used to that. I guess it's a wild guess, I would say.
Okay. Can you give us an update on the current development progress on EVM? Roughly when can the community expect it to go live?
Yeah. So it's a good question as well, right? So my understanding is that the Polka VM will go live with Polkadot next week as well. But like I said, I think that the main noise was done around the EVM because that was kind of the big shift that happened last year, right? Okay, they were working on the Polka VM. Polka VM got introduced to Kusama Hub, but then we're like, okay, we do notice some like differences in terms of compatibility, and they decided to target like a full Ethereum and EVM compatible environment to benefit from this like quick kind of like quick start effect, right? Like you can just deploy much more easier products on top of the EVM because it's a well-known VM for smart contracts than on top of the PVM. So it's coming to Polkadot next week, basically. So there's still some optimizations that need to be done in terms of truly kind of fully enable the true benefits of PVM. For example, at compilation and things like that. And so there's still sort of a lot of work being done to ensure developers can kind of fully benefit from the PVM. And there's also work being done on like I said before, like with the PVM and Resolve C, the compiler, you can actually write Solidity and develop and deploy it to the PVM, right? So usually Solidity is seen like a full EVM like only language, but with this technology, you're going to be able to write your contract in Solidity and then use the Polka VM virtual machine. And there's also work being done on like making sure that Hardhat and Foundry are full Polkadot VM or Polka VM compatible, right? So that people can still benefit from this like set of tools that they're super familiar with, and so that would make it really easy for projects to keep using their existing flows but target the PVM, right? And so there's still a little bit of work to be done, especially on the Foundry side, to be able to fully have like the full Foundry compatibility with the Polka VM backend, basically.
Okay.
And so yeah, there's a lot of things, right? And so that needs to be kind of like still developed. And this is an ongoing thing, right? Because then there'll be further optimizations that can be done to the VMs and the execution so that they're more efficient, etc.
Okay. Once the Polkadot Hub rollout is complete, what becomes the next major focus? Let's say Jam. Can we expect Jam to be delivered in 2026?
So it's hard to say when the hub rollout it's going to be complete. What is complete, right? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question. There's still many things that are being worked on, as I mentioned before, like Polka VM optimizations, infrastructure requirements for parity products, something that in the community is referred to BASI blocks, right? And so I don't really know. I don't know if there's like a line in which you say, okay, hub is done, and that's it. And so I think there's always going to be further improvements on the hub side. And so in terms of Jam, like Jam is definitely super exciting. And for what I know, there's a lot of progress being made, but it's unclear, at least to me, like, because I'm not a parity developer or anything. So like when it is planned to be rolled out, if it's in 2026 or 2027, right? It's been really exciting to see like the improvements and all the different clients that are like kind of jam compatible and so on. But from that to actually deploying on mainnet, there's, at least in my previous experiences, there's like a really long path, right? But what refers to hub, like I said, I think in 2026 we'll see a lot of optimizations and improvements being introduced, right? The first kind of like V0 has been delivered, but you still need to work on top of the initial baseline.
Okay. Okay, we've touched tons of knowledge in our conversation. And last but not least, looking ahead to 2026, what is the most thing that you are personally excited to see happen in Polkadot ecosystem?
Yep. Yeah. I would say for me, I would love to see kind of like 500 milliseconds block times. That's super exciting because if you think about user experience, one of the worst things about user experience, it's kind of like that wait, like that delay, and you submit your transaction and you're like waiting for it, right? And so I think I don't know if you noticed that in Kusama, when the upgrade was done in Kusama, block times were temporarily for 2 seconds. There was a technical glitch that actually put them up back to 6 seconds. But it is expected in Polkadot next week that you'll have 2 second block times on Hub, which will make it a way more fun environment to work on, right? And so I think for me, super excited to hear about 500 millisecond times block times, because that they'll make applications feel so snappy, right? It's like you submit something, boom, it's done. You don't have to wait that long. But also, just seeing the products that are introduced and rolled out throughout 2026, right? They've said about 2026 being more like an infrastructure year than product year, but still, like there, I bet there'll be some like products being released, and so seeing the proof of concepts, the experimentation, how that is applied on top of a Polkadot infrastructure, right? So that's super exciting, to be honest, and so we'll see.
Yeah, there's a lot ahead of 2026. We're looking forward to it. Okay,
Definitely.
thank you so much for your sharing, and thank you for the audience watching. And we will have some highlight clip of our interview, and later we will summarize the whole interview to a test version article to publish on our WeChat account, and welcome everyone that who's interested follow our account. So I think that's all for today, and we will keep in touch, and welcome back to our broadcast next time when there's new progress.
Thank you, Kirsten, for the invite. Happy to be here. Thank you.
Okay, Happy New Year. Bye-bye.
Bye.